What are best practices when transitioning into a new dialer?
Uh, that's a great question. Because it's kind of dependent on the dialer you're coming from and how your team is structured. I mean, number one, I think one of the most important things when you're talking about a power dialer, is you want to kind of combine thinking across a few things. Number one, you want to be thinking about the type of lists you've got and the quality of them, because that will determine a lot of times your approach in terms of how many numbers you use to call, the speed at which you're going to dial. That really does have an impact, because if you're using a list, for instance, if you're losing, and I'm not, by the way, this isn't directed at you, so I'm just
Mhm.
gonna give hypotheticals. So I'm
You're
not, I'm
good.
not, I'm not trying to insult your list or anything, but where I see people buying lower quality data, where the numbers are potentially, a lot of the numbers are bad numbers. You've got to be very careful, because the more you hit those bad numbers, if you do a lot of calling on bad numbers in a rapid succession, the carriers are going to look at that and they're going to start flagging your numbers very quickly, right? So data, the type of data you're using is really important. If you're creating a campaign for pure cold calling, then obviously you want to make sure that you have properly scrubbed all your leads against the DNC list, and you're doing that probably every 30 days, right? It is not like, trust me, if you start calling numbers that are on the DNC list, that is a no-no, and it's going to come back to you, because it comes back through the FCC and through the TCPA to the carriers, that come back to us, and then we come back to you. So DNC scrubbing is an absolute must. And also gauging, like if you're doing a lot of follow-up calling. So a lot of our customers will use smrtDialer to grab a list of leads they're already talking to, because they just want to do it easier. And in that
Mhm.
case, a two-line dialer with a couple numbers is probably going to work really well. If you've got a colder list, you're going to want to scrub them, and you're going to want to probably use 5, 6, 7, 8 numbers, so that you are balancing the load a little more. That's definitely something we would recommend. There's the other thing is, as well, is there are compliance areas you should be aware of if you are using a dialer for a colder approach. Things,
Mhm.
number one, the DNC scrub, absolutely. Number two, if you are telemarketing, having a SAN number is a really important element of that. That's you verifying who you are. And number three is making sure you're fully registered in our trust center, so that we are applying stir shake into your account, because that is, again, a way of you identifying who you are, so that the carriers know. Finally, a really good thing I would recommend, if you haven't done it already, is to make sure, and this is less about being a dialer, but just more because you're doing this, if you're using a dialer and you're using it for lead generation, is to make sure that you register your numbers.
Mhm.
We've got, not just in our trust center, but we've got a help documentation article that I'm sure someone is looking up right now to post on it. Usually Ellen, this is when she slams it in the chat before I can mention it. But there are a couple services and websites you can use, which lets you register your phone numbers, and it registers with the carriers. And again, it's one of those things that everything you can do to kind of show who you are and show you're legitimate helps you in when you're making more volume calls, because the carriers look for people they can't know who they are. The carriers look for
Mhm.
bad behavior. And if you can demonstrate good behavior and you can make sure you're showing who you are, you're far more likely to be working within within a compliant process.